Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new podcast episode. I hope that you're all doing well, and I am doing well because I just finished an entire season of Love Island. So it's the first time that I actually watched an entire season of Love Island because the first time that I tried to watch Love Island was during the season 7, and I didn't even finish it. So I know that I'm a little bit late, but I don't know. I didn't want it to record this episode because I feel like I took too much time to actually record it, and I was wondering if it was still an interesting subject for you guys. So, yeah, I was hesitating, but I have decided to post this episode no matter what. So, for this season 8, we have decided with my friend to watch all the episode and talking about it together and debating about the episodes together, which was a very fun activity that I recommend if you don't know what to do with your friends. Like, watch a TV show or a reality show at the same time and do debate nights after every episode. I swear this is a very fun activity. But anyways, I have a lot of things to say about this season and we are going to discuss about it together. We are going to talk about my favorite couples, about Sincere. I have a lot of things to say about Sincere. Oh my god. Also, we are going to talk about how the men acted in the show and about Kenzie. Well, we're just going to talk about every things that caught my attention during this season 8 of Love Island. So, grab your favorite drink and let's get started. So first of all, let's start about my favorite couples. I know that we had a lots of different couples this season, but I was kind of surprised that most of the couples were the same from the beginning. The couples that we had since the beginning of the season were like, I think it was Kada and Zach, Melanie and Sincere, Trinity and Bryce. Okay, now that I think about it, it's not a lot, but I feel like most of the couples took time to explore, like Casey and Anaya, Bia and Gabrielle, Trinity and Bryce, Kada and Zach, and finally Melanie and Sincere. To be honest, I was bored at first because I felt like there was no exploring and they were acting like real couples and immediately went crazy when their connection were pulling other participants for a chat. So when Sol was saying that it was Couple Island and not Love Island, I feel like she was right because why were they acting like that? They were really acting like if they were long term relationship couples, and it's not how Love Island is supposed to work. So I really understand why Sol was frustrated in this episode when she said that it was more like Couple Islands than Love Island because why nobody was exploring? And they were considering exploring like cheating when it's not cheating because it's Love Island. So that's the whole point of the game. I'm not trying to defend Soul here because I know that she was involved in quite a lot of drama recently post Villa, so I'm not going to talk about that. By the way, I'm not going to talk about any drama that happened post Villa because I don't really know much about it. I'm just going to talk about what happened during the season, like during the Love Island season. So if you want another episode that talks about Love Island post Villa drama, I can do that. But yeah, let me know in the comments. But, anyways, to be honest with you guys, I was bored at first because I felt like there were no exploring. They were acting like real couples and immediately went crazy when their connection were pulling other participants for a chat. And I was really expecting more couple drama like in season 7. I know that the season 7 was full of drama, even though I didn't finish it. And I know that Huda was a controversial participant, but let's be honest, the season 7 was very interesting thanks to her. So, yeah, besides Huda's drama, I feel like overall there were lots of drama during every episode. So, it caught my attention more during the beginning because I was about to stop season 8 during the beginning since there were no drama or since I thought that nothing was really interesting and like nothing interesting was happening until Casa Amor, to be honest. So I saw a theory on X and TikTok. I hate saying X, I feel like it's wrong. Like I'm going to keep saying Twitter. So I saw some theory on Twitter and TikTok, and some people were saying that the OG participants, which means those who were there from the start of the show, were planning to stay in the same couple until the end of the show to make sure to win. And this theory was mostly focusing on the men especially on Zach and Bryce, Sincere and Casey. And to be honest, at first I was believing this theory. Like, it's just my personal opinion, but I feel like some of those couple weren't genuine to me. Like, there were no real connection, especially the one with Zach and Kata. Have you seen Kata? Like, you have a girl like Kata next to you, and you don't really seem more interested than that. Like, guys, have you seen how drop dead gorgeous Kata is? It doesn't make sense to me. Also, at first, I didn't see the chemistry between Trinity and Bryce. Like, I didn't feel like they were a good match. And obviously, I was wrong because they proved that they really loved each other. And spoiler alert, they even won the game. So, yeah, I think they proved that they were a genuine couple. Also, they ended up being my favorite couple with Carl and Anaya. So, yeah, I guess my opinion changed a lot on Trinity and Bryce. But at first, like at the beginning, I would never imagine that Trinity and Bryce would stay together because to me, they just didn't match at all. So, yeah, at first I was believing this theory because the couples were acting too closed off when it was just the beginning, which seems weird to me. But tell me what you think in the comments, guys. Also, during this season, my favorite couples, like I said, were Trinity and Bryce and Carl and Anaya. So, Trinity and Bryce, it was because their relationship kind of reminded me of a friends to lover type of romance. Like, we saw how their relationship evolved through the season. And at first, I was skeptical about it because I'm always very protective towards black women in this type of dating show or in everyday life too, to be honest. But yeah, I was skeptical about it. And at the end, they were really the best couple of the show, according to me. I love Trinity so much. Like, she's my age and she's so mature, well spoken, and nice in the show. Also, she looks amazing. So I tried to reproduce her makeup so many times and yeah, I kind of failed, but her makeup is amazing. She is amazing. And I also love the way she dressed and the heels that she was wearing during the entire season. So, yeah, Trinity and Bryce were definitely my faves. And I mean, I love the core four during the season in general. They reminded me of the Cheetah Girls or the Brats or something. You know, they all had their own style, their own vibe. And I like the fact that they were really close to each other and there were no drama between them. And I think that this is really important to see this type of friendship in shows like that, especially among black women or of color in general. Now, let's talk about the biggest pathological liar, and of course, it's Sincere. No, I'm just kidding. Before I say anything, I want to make one thing clear. I'm joking when I call him a pathological liar because I don't know this man personally, and I am completely against people sending hate to any reality TV contestant, except Kenny. Just kidding. No, seriously, Sincere, Zach, Casey, none of them deserve to be bullied online because at the end of the day, it's a reality show. We only see edited version of them, of the events, and we don't know those people. So if the cast members have moved on and are cool with each other, then who are we to keep attacking them, right? That being said, while I was watching this season, I genuinely kept asking myself what the hell was wrong with Sincere. Not because I think he's an evil person, but because I could never understand his logic. Every episode, he somehow managed to make a situation 10 times more complicated than it was supposed to be. At the beginning, I actually liked him with Melanie. I thought they looked good together. They seemed comfortable. There wasn't really any major drama, and I thought they could actually become one of those stable couples that just quietly make it to the end. And if I remember correctly, everything started changing either right before Sol entered the villa or when she came in. I don't really remember the exact time because honestly, so much happened in this season. But that's when things started feeling off. And here what's confused me. There's absolutely nothing wrong with realizing you like someone else more. That's literally the point of Love Island. New bombshells come in, connections change, people explore. Nobody's forced to stay loyal to the first person they couple up with. What matters is how you handle things. And Sincere somehow managed to choose the most confusing routes every single time. Instead of just saying, hey, Melanie, I think I have a stronger connection with Sol. I want to explore that. It always felt like Sincere wasn't able to say it clearly. Like, on the one hand, he was telling Soul, yeah, I really want to explore with you. I'm interested in you. And on the other hand, he was telling Melanie that he wasn't interested in Soul and that he felt secured in his relationship with her. It's like he had one version for Melanie and another version for Soul, and then another version for the boys. And then somehow a completely different explanation at the fire spit. Every time someone confronted him, I felt like I was watching him improvise an answer on the spot. I would literally sit there thinking, wait, didn't you just say the exact opposite yesterday? Maybe the edit exaggerated it, but I don't know. As a viewer, it became really hard to trust anything he was saying because the story kept changing and he kept gaslighting both Melanie and Soul. I felt so bad for them, especially for Soul when she was dumped from the villa, and what made it even more frustrating was that he always seemed shocked when people question him. Like, sir, you created that confusion. You can't tell three people different things and then act surprised when they compare notes. Like, that's not how you're supposed to communicate. One thing that also stood out to me was how often he seemed to avoid giving a direct answer. Like, someone would ask him a very simple question, like, do you still want Melanie? And instead of saying yes or no, he would get a 2-minute speech that somehow answered nothing. Or someone would ask, did you tell her this? And then he will start talking about intentions, feelings, timing. Like, bro, it's a yes or no question. I don't know if he was trying to protect everyone's feelings or if he genuinely didn't know what he wanted himself, but from the outside, it just looked incredibly messy. So I'm glad that movie night happened because all his lies were exposed to the entire villa and there were no escape this time. And the fact that even the boys didn't defend him showed how wrong he was because we know how they love defending Casey even though he was wrong. So for the boys to stop defending Sincere, it just showed how wrong and how messed up the situation was. And honestly, I think that's what frustrated viewers the most. It wasn't even necessarily the decision he made, it was the lack of accountability afterwards. Because everyone makes mistakes in that villa. Literally everyone. People kiss the wrong person, people change their minds, people hurt other people's feelings. That happened every single season. Usually audiences are surprisingly forgiving when someone just owns it. So I think that if Sincere had simply said, yeah, I handled that badly, I should have been more honest, I messed up, I didn't do it, I would not do it again, I think people would move on much faster. But instead, it often felt like he was trying to explain why what happened and that it wasn't his fault. And after a while, every explanation started sounding like another excuse, like he was apologizing, if we can call that apologize, and then he was lying again. Another thing that made me laugh, not in a mean way, but because it became almost predictable, was that every time I thought the drama was finally over, Sincere would somehow end up back in the middle of another misunderstanding. I would literally think, okay, surely this storyline is finished. And 5 minutes later, another conversation, another contradiction, another person saying, but that's not what you told me. It honestly became almost like a running joke while I was watching. And despite all of that, I don't actually think Sincere came into the villa trying to manipulate everyone. Personally, I think he just handled conflict terribly to me, and he came across as someone who wanted everyone to like him at the same time. I feel like he didn't want to disappoint Melanie, he didn't want to lose his chance with Soul, he didn't want the boys to think badly of him. And when you try to keep everybody happy, you usually end up doing the exact opposite. Nobody's happy and you dig yourself into a deeper hole. Then you have to explain the explanation and then explain the explanation of the explanation until eventually nobody knows what's the truth anymore, including maybe yourself. So when I was watching this season of Love Island, I kept saying to my TV, just tell the truth. Even if people get upset, at least they know where they stand, because confusion usually hurts more people than honesty. So overall, Sincere was probably one of the contestants who frustrated me the most this season, not because of one huge shocking moment, but because every episode left me thinking, why did you make that so much harder than it needed to be? However, let's be honest, it made the show entertaining. Okay, now I have to talk about Anaya, Casey, and Carl. I have to say it, I never liked Anaya and Casey together. I know some people were rooting for them, but from the very beginning, I wasn't feeling it. Every time I watched them together, something felt off. I couldn't really explain it at first. It wasn't that they were arguing all the time or that they dislike each other, but it just didn't seem natural. Like, it just didn't seem like a natural chemistry to me. I actually remember telling my friend while we were watching, I don't think Casey and Anaya are going to last, and I kept saying that something didn't feel right between them. And I'm not saying I predicted the future, but let's just say I wasn't exactly surprised by how things turn out between them. What really stood out to me wasn't even Casey, it was Anaya. When she was with Casey, honestly, she became much more insecure. Like, it felt like she constantly needed reassurance from him. Every conversation seemed to revolve around whether he still liked her, whether they were still good, whether his head could turn, whether he was being genuine. And I didn't understand why she needed reassurance from him because, girl, you are Anaya. She's pretty, she's wealthy, she seems very down to earth. So I was wondering if maybe she was insecure because maybe Casey didn't made her feel secured. Like, she always looked like she was searching for validation. Now maybe that's just because of the environment, because Love Island is designed to make people question their relationships every 5 minutes. Bombshells come in, people get stolen, Casa Amor happen. Of course, you're going to feel insecure sometimes, but that's just how she came across to me. And I felt so bad for her when Casey chose Titi after Casa Amor. By the way, I didn't like the Casa Amor girl at all this season. I won't talk about them in this episode, but yeah, I didn't really like the vibe that they were given. But at the same time, I was happy that Casey chose Titi because honestly, I don't think Casey was made for her. Like, he wasn't meant for Anaya. And also, thanks to that, she ended up with Carl. So I was very happy. Talking about Carl, I genuinely feel like I was watching a different Anaya. She seemed lighter, she smiled more, she looked more confident. She wasn't constantly chasing reassurance anymore. Instead, it felt like she could just enjoy getting to know someone without overthinking every little interaction. And that's honestly one of the biggest signs of compatibility to me. Sometimes it's not about who says the nicest things, it's about who brings out the best version of yourself. And I really feel like Carl brings out the best version of Anaya. Like, she seemed more relaxed, confident, and secured in her relationship with Carl. Also, can we talk about Carl for a second? First of all, this man literally looks like a prince. Every time he came on my screen, I was like, is this a Disney casting? They kind of reminded me of the movie Cinderella with Brandy and Paolo Montalban, I think that's his name. He's incredibly handsome, but beyond that, I just loved the way he carried himself. He was soft spoken, very calm, very charming. He didn't seem interested in unnecessary drama. And whenever he talked, he seemed thoughtful and respectful, and there was something really reassuring about his energy. And honestly, I just think he matched Anaya's vibe so much better, and he could definitely match my vibe too, not gonna lie. Anaya also comes across as someone who's very well spoken and carries herself with a lot of confidence. She has that classy, elegant energy, according to me. And we also know she grew up with certain opportunities, being the daughter of a former NBA player. And whether people like it or not, your surrounding can influence your lifestyle, your expectations, and the way you communicate. To me, Carl just fit naturally into that world, and I feel like Casey was feeling the same when he stated that Titi and him matched better because they came from the same environment. Their conversations flowed better, their personality seems more balanced, and it never felt forced. Whereas with Casey, I always felt like they were trying to convince themselves and maybe us that the connection was stronger than it actually was. Again, that's just my opinion as a viewer. I'm not saying that Casey's a bad guy or that he didn't care about Anaya. I just don't think they were the right match. And sometimes two perfectly nice people simply aren't compatible. And I think that's exactly what happened here. The biggest difference for me wasn't what Casey or Carl did, it was Anaya herself. The way she carried herself changed. With Casey, I often felt like she was worried about losing him. With Carl, it felt like she knew her worth. And that's a huge difference. When you're with the right person, you shouldn't constantly feel like you're competing for their attention or wondering where you stand. You should feel comfortable enough to just be yourself. And that's exactly the impression I got watching Anaya with Carl. Maybe that's why I ended up rooting for them so much. So, yeah, no matter how much people were invested in Casey and Anaya, I just never bought into that relationship. And from episode one, I wasn't convinced. And by the end of the season, I felt like the show confirmed exactly what I've been thinking all along. They simply weren't the best match for each other. Now, let's talk about the men in this season. And I already talked a lot about Sincere, but let's talk about the men in general. To start with Zach, I think Zach is probably one of the contestants who divided viewers the most this season. Some people absolutely loved him. Actually, I think not a lot of people liked him. Others were convinced that he was playing a game. There were so many moments where I find myself asking, is this genuine or is this too strategic? Because sometimes the way he handled situations felt a little too calculated. I kept wondering if he was always thinking one step ahead, like, was he making decisions because that's genuinely how he felt or because he knew how those decisions would come across on TV? Again, I don't know this man, so I'm not going to sit here and say he only wanted to win because I don't know that. I have absolutely no way of knowing that, but I can definitely understand why some viewers came away with that impression, especially because every time something happened, Zach always seemed to land on his feet. It almost felt like he knew exactly how to navigate the villa, like the way he was always trying to convince other people in the villa to explore when he never really explored himself. He did this with Trinity and Bryce, with Anaya and Casey, with Melanie and Sincere, and I think he even tried to do it with Carl and Anaya when he asked Carl what is his usual type. Like, what do you mean by that? But anyways, now let's talk about him and Keita. Just like for Casey and Anaya, I think they didn't match together. I'm sorry. Don't get me wrong, I love Keita. She's absolutely gorgeous and she seemed to really love Zach, but at the same time, I never fully believed they were this epic love story everyone kept talking about. To me, they felt more like a situationship than a couple. They clearly cared about each other, even though I felt like Keita cared a little bit more than he did. But like in comparison to Bryce and Trinity, I never watched them and thought, yeah, these two are definitely going to get married. It felt more like two people who enjoyed each other's company, had chemistry, and wanted to make it work. Whether that's enough outside the villa, only time will tell. Now, can we please discuss Casey again? Because one thing that really disappointed me was the way he talked about Anaya during Casa Amor. Or even before that, calling her a grandma, really, that wasn't necessary at all. Like, you don't have to be compatible with someone, you don't have to stay with them, you don't even have to be attracted to them anymore, but making little comments like that just felt disrespectful, especially considering how much Anaya had invested in that relationship. And then, when Casey explained why he connected with Titi the most, I felt like he was only saying that she was effortless. He didn't say it immediately, but that's what I felt. Because I kept thinking maybe she felt effortless because she had just arrived. Everything is exciting when it's new, you're flirting, there's no history, no difficult conversations, no arguments, no expectations. So, of course, it's going to feel effortless. Meanwhile, Anaya had been there from the beginning and they had already been through challenges together, real conversations, moments of insecurity. That's naturally going to feel heavier than a brand new connection. So I don't know if effortless necessarily means more compatible, and if I were Titi, I wouldn't take this as a compliment. And honestly, hearing him describe Anaya the way he did made me feel for her even more because I don't think she deserved that. She handled herself with a lot of more grace that I would have, which brings me to something that honestly frustrated me throughout the entire season, the men. I'm sorry, but what was going on this year? I felt like over and over again, the women were expected to be patient, understanding, and forgiving, while some of the guys kept making the same mistakes over and over again and always find excuses. Or maybe I think this way because I'm a woman, so maybe I'm biased. But I feel like whenever one of the girls reacted emotionally, suddenly she was doing too much. But when the guys messed up, there was always an excuse. Oh, I was confused. Oh, I needed clarity. Oh, I wanted to test my connection. I didn't mean it like that. It started sounding like the same speech on repeat. And one thing I really appreciated about the women this season is that they actually held each other accountable, but they also supported one another, especially the core four, which was Trinity, Kada, Anaya, and Melanie. I love them so much. Meanwhile, some of the boys seemed determined to defend each other no matter what. Even when someone was clearly in the wrong, it became almost predictable. Someone would mess up, the boys would gather for a chat, and instead of saying, Bro, you handled that badly, it often felt like they were trying to justify it. Not every single guy, of course. There were definitely contestants who carried themselves really well. But overall, I just came away feeling like these girls deserved better. There were so many moments where I found myself rooting for the women. Not because they were perfect, because they definitely weren't, but because it felt like they were constantly having to deal with unnecessary stress created by the boys, especially Melanie, Anaya, Jen, and Sol. By the end of the season, I honestly thought the strongest relationships weren't necessarily the romantic ones, it was the friendship between the girls, and I think that Melanie should date Anaya instead of Sincere. Yes, I'm breaking my silence. Those were the relationships that felt the most genuine to me, and maybe that's my biggest takeaway from this season. The romance was entertaining, the drama was entertaining, but the women, they carried this season. Okay, finally, I have to give Kenzie her flowers because to me, she was one of the contestants who actually played Love Island the way it was supposed to be played. She explored, she got to know different people, she wasn't afraid to move on when something wasn't working, but at the same time, she never let anyone disrespected her. And that's the difference. Some people hear exploring and think it means accepting the bare minimum for everyone. Kenzie was like, nope, she gave people a chance, but the second she felt like she wasn't being valued, she was gone. And I absolutely love that. She had so much confidence without coming across as arrogant, and she knew what she deserved, and she wasn't willing to lower her standards just because she was in the villa. And one moment that really stood out to me was with Zach. Like the second he disappointed her, she was done. There was no begging, no chasing him, no trying to convince him to pick her. She simply accepted it, moved on, and if I remember correctly, she barely spoke to him ever again. I was like, yes, girl, that's exactly the kind of energy we love to see. And overall, Kenzie was one of my favorite girls this season because she respected herself and she stayed true to herself and reminded everyone that exploring connections doesn't mean forgetting your self worth. So, yeah, those were my thoughts on this season of Love Island. Overall, I really, really enjoyed watching it. Was it messy? Absolutely. Did some of these contestants makes me want to scream at my TV 100%, but that's exactly why we watch reality TV, right? I don't expect everyone to agree with my opinions, and that's completely okay. That's what makes these shows so fun because we all watch the same exact episodes and somehow come away with completely different takes. These were just my opinion as a viewer, and I don't know any of these people personally, and I genuinely wish all of them the best outside the villa. Reality TV is entertaining, but at the end of the day, these are real people, so let's keep the conversations fun and respectful. I'd actually love to know what you guys think, and do you agree with my opinions, or do you think I'm completely wrong? Was I too harsh on Sincere, or do you think Zach was genuine? Did you love Casey and Anaya together, or were you like me and never really saw it? Let me know in the comments because I genuinely want to hear your takes. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And if you're listening on Spotify, it would really help me out if you could leave a rating or a review. It only takes a few seconds, but it helps the podcast to reach more people. So if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share this episode with your friends, especially that one who's just as obsessed with Love Island as you are. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this little rant, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye, everyone.